Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Travis Barrett with Dynamic Human Performance, and you're listening to the Rep by Rep Strength podcast with Coach Sean Waxman today. Coach, thanks for sitting down and talking training for a little while. Why don't you go ahead and just give everybody a little bit of your background here?
I'm a coach, weightlifting and strength and conditioning. Uh, this is this is my 30th, I think my 30th, 31st year as a coach. Um, Started as an athlete, uh, played football in college. Wanted to be a coach early on, so I got into weightlifting to look. I want to get into strength and conditioning. I got into weightlifting to help me learn the the movements that I would use, the tools that I would use with strength and conditioning. I figured the best way to get good at anything is immerse yourself in that world, and weightlifting uses all the tools, and so I did that first to as a training tool to become a strength coach, and then I fell in love with weightlifting and got good at it pretty quickly. So I adopted that as a sport, and along the way, it was the people that I trained with. Most of them wanted to be coaches, so it was a really interesting training environment because we would train together, and then after training, we would talk about weightlifting or coaching. So it was great. So it was kind of a 9-year PhD in in movement. My coach, Bob Takano, and he's a really good scientist. Biology and physiology are his background. So, and he was very generous with his time with me. So I would come early before we would train. He was training the high school kids, and he allowed me to be a fly on the wall, and I would ask questions, and so it was a really great learning experience for me. And at the same time, I started my first strength and conditioning job at LA City College, and that kick-started my strength and conditioning career. So I worked at college level and then high school level as well, and pro level with the LA Kings and Long Beach Ice Dogs. And then 2007, I just focused on weightlifting. Opened up a weightlifting only gym, and from 2007 to 2020, that's all I did was predominantly was just coach weightlifting. I had a gym in Los Angeles, Waxman's gym, and the 95% of what we did was weightlifting. So in 2020, I closed the gym. I had COVID made it too difficult for me to want to stay in LA. So I moved to Utah and did nothing for 6 months. I decompressed from the experience of the previous 2 years, and got a call out of the blue from Eric Jones, who was named the new head football coach at one of the big Bingham High School, which is kind of the historically dominant high school in Utah. And he asked me if I wanted to be a strength coach, and I wanted to get back into strength and conditioning. I didn't want to use weight. I didn't want to have weightlifting as my money maker anymore, like the brick and mortar. So it's interesting. You put it out to the universe. Sometimes it actually happens. So I started back high school strength and conditioning. Did that for 2 years, and then took a job at the University of Utah with football there. Did it for a season, and then realized that it wasn't what I thought it was going to be, and went back to the same high school, which I'm at now. So I still have I opened up I have a small 400 square foot space that I coach my weightlifters at, which is great. And it's I make more money now in that 400 square foot space with my guys than I did with this giant hundreds thousands of dollars of revenue gym that I had in LA, which is kind of odd. But so I have the best of both worlds now. I got coaching weightlifting, coaching strength and conditioning at high school level, and very happy with the way things are now. Writing a lot, and I have a book coming out. Nothing to do with weightlifting really, but I have a Suffer Smarter's coming out hopefully at the end of the month. So yeah, it's good. So that's kind of the elevator pitch of my
No,
life.
that's so apparently like the really good coaches out of Utah are just like they start publishing books now. So you got I think I've read every one of Dan John's books and now you're joining that list. And so
Yeah, it was cool when I got here. I realized, oh man, he's Dan John's in Utah. So
yeah,
anybody in the industry knows who Dan is.
yeah.
So I just called him, and he said, "Hey, come on over." He's got this cool setup in his garage, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, he was. So yeah, he's here, and talk about prolific. Holy cow, that guy can write.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so I'm trying to summon a little bit of Dan John uh, in my life. So yeah, but it's great out here working with high school. Culture's different out here than it is in LA.
Mm-hmm.
So I really enjoy I really enjoy being out here and working with those boys.
Yeah, it's funny. We've got a kid right now who's he's on the pre team and he's from Utah. And I said, hey, do you happen to know Bingham? And he's like, yeah, they're one of our rival schools that we played against, and they're tough every year. So um, I think he's about 20, 21 years old right now. So uh,
Okay.
anyway, I'm sure you've prepped some guys that he went up against in high school,
I hope
but
so.
yeah. So that I didn't realize that Takano was your coach because I've read some of
Yeah.
Takano's books over the years, and those were very influential as far as my how I viewed coaching and how I looked at the analysis side of tracking things and whatnot. So um,
Yeah, me too. I mean, he wrote a series of 4 articles for the NSCA Journal many, many, many years ago in the '90s, and it was the first. I just gotten into the NSCA and got my CSCS and found those articles, and it was the first time I had read something written by anybody at that time because there was no internet, so you couldn't just go online. But it was the first time the way he wrote about weightlifting, the language he used,
mhm.
and the level of detail. It I said, that's how I want to know weightlifting. I
Yeah.
want to be able to speak about it that way, and that's probably that's one of the two reasons why I came out to California for grad school. I was trying to decide where I want to go to grad school, and I knew that I wanted to be involved in weightlifting, and I wanted to learn about uh, science, of performance. And we had talked earlier in Ball State with Dr. Pearson and Appalachian
Mhm.
State with Dr. Stone,
Mhm.
and but there was no real there was really no weightlifting, and Dr. Garhammer came onto my radar as far as biomechanics. I had it came on my radar because my biomechanics professor in undergrad, Dr. Peter McGinnis, who was really big in the pole vault world.
Mm.
He knew, we got along really well, and I would talk to him a lot. And he knew I had expressed an interest in weightlifting. And Dr. McGinnis said, "Hey, you should look into to going to Long Beach State with Dr. Garhammer, and I looked him up, and I was like, oh man, this is definitely the stuff that I want to learn. And then I had those articles with Takano, and it said Van Nuys, California, and
Mhm.
literally I just took a map, a real map, and I opened up the
One
map,
that you
and I
actually
looked
pulled
at
out.
when you actually fold, right? And I put it on the table, and I saw, so there's Long Beach, and there's Van Nuys, and I said, oh, it's about 50 miles, and I said, okay, I can do that, and then I applied to Long Beach State,
Mm.
and I hadn't even got accepted. I got accepted to Appalachian State, to Texas, a couple other schools, but I hadn't gotten accepted to Long Beach State. But I figured, man, I got accepted to these other schools. I was flirting with medical school, and I said, "There's no way I'm not going to get accepted." So I just said, "Screw it." I packed up my shit and started driving to California. I figured, if I didn't get in, I'd figure it out. And then I was in Arizona. I was driving from New York. In Arizona, I called my mom, and she said, "Oh yeah, you got accepted to Long Beach State." I was like, "Okay, great." And then I left. When I called my mom, I was at a rest stop, and got back in the car and driving, and I realized that I left my fanny pack in the bathroom with all my money.
Oh shit.
Yeah, so when I got to California, I basically was broke. I think I had like whatever money I had in my pocket was, $50, and yeah, so that was my auspicious start in California, but
Woo.
figured it out.
All right.
Then I didn't get my financial aid, my loan. Not
Yeah.
my loan didn't go through. So I was like, oh man. So I was homeless for a while. My first semester at Long Beach State, I was homeless. So yeah,
Whoa,
but
man.
you do what you got to do, man.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember reading some of that stuff from Takano where I thought the way he, like, there's a phrasing he used where he talked about, like, he kept referring instead of a person, he'd say, like, the organism, you know, where he's like, the stress to the organism. And that was like,
That's how he coached, man. He didn't see you as a human. He had no
and
remorse.
which I can see both sides, where it's like, okay, that has some pros where it's like, nope, this is what we're going to do. And I can see some cons where it's like, hey, we kind of need to adjust some things because the freaking organism isn't adjusting to or responding the way we intended. Um, but no,
Yeah, yeah. It was it was quite an experience.
because there was like a group of Van Nuys guys, right, that like really started popping out of there and doing really well.
Well, he
Um,
was, he had an Olympian in '84, so I mean, and he had one of the best women athletes in the world. I walked into that room, and there was two former Olympians, one from Iran, one from Portugal. There was, Diana Furman, who was a, world, she's been multiple world teams, American record holder. Mike Andrade was one of the top middleweight, light heavyweights in the country. It was just full of just killers,
yeah,
and me, but one thing that was great about being in a room like that with a coach like that is, if you were the worst guy or the best guy, if you were serious about what you were doing, everybody got along because we all shared that um, the effort, right? And we were doing the same, not the same necessarily the same training, but we were sharing the same experience, and that
yeah,
was the bond. So it didn't matter, what your level was.
right.
So, it was such a great experience for me. I think that his coaching style for me wasn't the best. For some, it was. But he basically told me early on. I came in and my measurables were great. Like I could run fast, I could jump high. I was a really good athlete. So on paper, he looked at me and says, "Yeah, you can do this, but you're old." By the time I got to California, I was 24.
Yeah,
So he
you're
says,
old.
"You're
You're
old."
damn near dead, man.
He says, "You're talented." He says, "You got about 6 years." He says, "If you could survive these first 6 years and continue to improve," he says,
Yeah.
"you're going to have a shot to, be an international level lifter." And he says, "But," he says, but you might not survive it. Like you might get broken." And I said, "Well, whatever it takes, I'll do whatever." And so I had this meteoric rise for the first 4 years, and then I couldn't. Then I just got broke, and I
So
couldn't really improve all that much past that. But
was
we
it
had some guys that,
was it the volume that
so
started to accumulate over time for you within those six
volume.
years, or what? Okay.
Yeah, it was the volume. He was, his in his mind, increases in volume year over year were how you got better,
Hmm.
and I'm not a believer in that. I have a now as a coach, I just think that works with drugs. It doesn't work without drugs, and we didn't take drugs.
Hmm.
So, um, but he had a way of developing weightlifters that worked if you were the right fit.
Right.
He wasn't going to change it for you. You knew that, and I knew that going in. It wasn't like I was, but so we had a couple of guys, Andy Tish and Mike Andrade, both became international lifters, and they just the volume was never a problem for them. So I had come from football, and I was beat up anyway. So I went out from the fire into the frying pan, or frying pan into the fire, I should say. But the experience made me a much better coach. So, to go through that process to understand what it feels like to change through
Right.
stress, what it feels like to show up every day, regardless of how you feel,
Hmm.
um, you know, to experience that level of discomfort, um, all that information, all that experience makes you a better coach if you're paying attention.
Hmm.
I think that I don't get
Yeah.
people coaches, especially in weightlifting or even strength and conditioning. If you've never been through the metamorphosis of training, hard training, uh, then how do you explain what's going to happen to somebody if you've never experienced it for yourself? I think the best strength coaches come from weightlifting, uh, specifically, but strength sports in general, because of the experience of that training and the visceral understanding of, I do this thing and here's how it changes my homeostasis. I can feel it. I can then explain it to you. Here's what's going to happen. You can tell them,
Yeah.
not because you read it in a book, not because you got a certification for a weekend, not because
Mm.
you went to physical therapy school. It's because you bled and sweated and understand what this process feels like.
Right.
Those make the best coach. So I'm very grateful, regardless of what I did in weightlifting. I'm
Hmm.
grateful for having gone through that experience because I think it made me the coach I am today.
because I remember, a handful of things from his writings where he would talk about, typically into a training cycle before he would consider backing off. Like we're going to see people typically get colds. They're not going to sleep real well. They'll become irritable.
Diarrhea.
Then,
I
yeah,
mean,
then he'll start to
brutal.
back things off. So, um, I mean, were these consistent
Maybe.
with what he might back off
Oh
after
yeah,
a
no.
game?
Everything he writes about, like in his book,
Mm-hmm.
which is a great, it's a great book. You know, that program at the end is 98 American Open training cycle. I went through that. It nearly killed
Yeah.
me. Yeah, I never could stay healthy at that point. 98, that was my last year of uh, of improvement, real improvement. But I did that training cycle, um, did well, but it was so brutal that I couldn't recover in time because that was in December. Nationals was probably April or May.
Mm.
I It took me a month or more to recover from that training cycle, and I just was never the same after that. It just killed me. Um, and But yeah, I mean, everything he writes about, he's not writing things, telling stories that are fables. This is reality. This
Yeah.
is exactly what we went through. So, yeah, brutal. Everybody, like, they would, nobody was doing what we were doing, I don't think. I mean, I don't know. I wasn't in the rooms for everybody else, but not that other clubs weren't doing hard training, it's just different.
Sure. Yeah. Because that would, backing up a moment to where you're talking about the volume of the year over year. My thought and kind of what I've noticed with athletes, especially as they get stronger, is we can't do as much because, and I get it. Everybody talks about like loads relative, and 60% still 60%, but at the same time, like yeah, that 60% is higher and higher and higher as you get stronger. Therefore, the recovery is likely going to be harder for taller individuals, people who are stronger. I mean, has there
Yeah,
been anything like that that you've
yeah.
noticed with athletes or that you change or what are the volume recommendations you're making now?
So I have some general guidelines. I think the important thing is with beginner and intermediate athletes, it doesn't matter as much because
Yeah.
their output isn't near their capacity.
Yeah.
So the volume, we have to, I have uh, guidelines,
Mhm.
for generally for for the for the special preparation, which is in between the general and competition. Uh, for beginning athletes, training 5 days a week. Uh, between uh, well, say training 4 days a week. Between 200 and 300 or so reps a week. Uh, but it doesn't matter as much because again, they're not lifting near what their bodies are capable of. But as you get to the elite level, I think it's important to really find what their capacity is because you don't really know, and you have to find out like what their thresholds are, and you
Mhm.
have to stay. This is where I don't believe in the year over year increases in volume. I think that stops after a certain amount of time. So then you're
Mhm.
stuck within this. Here's the capacity you have.
Right.
So then, how do you continue to improve if you can't use increases in volume as the key stimulus to improvement? So then you have to figure out how do I manipulate within that capacity. How do I manipulate the volume and the intensity to continue to improve? So it becomes a little, because the elite level, or the ones that are getting there, are really performing, to your point. They're, every lift that they do is closer to their capacity than it was before. Therefore, the stress of that is going to be higher, and that stress accumulates. But you need the stress for change.
Right.
But too
Yeah.
much, then you start to break down. Uh, I take the approach of the most important training day is the next day.
Hmm.
So the decisions you make on any given day shouldn't negatively affect the next training. It doesn't mean that they're not going to be beat up and sore or whatever, but
Right.
it's got to be something that allows them to still train and have a high output.
Yeah.
So that's one of the big differences between. So that's why I like to plan a whole training, 12 or 60, whatever it is, for an elite level athlete, and sit down and write down every rep, set, intensity, I think is a waste of time. You got to have a plan, but you have to, I think you live your life in 3 or 4 week increments.
Yep.
Until and then you have to reevaluate every 3 or 4 weeks. Doesn't mean you change the whole direction of where you're going, but the specifics of how you're the stress of it all, the reps and the sets have to be adjusted based on what just happened. Whereas beginning athletes, you can hand them, here's 12 weeks, and it doesn't mean you don't change things, but you don't have to worry about the them killing themselves, because
Because
they're not lifting their weight.
they're still learning how to push that threshold. They're still
Right? They
working
can't
on
hurt themselves. They're not good enough.
yeah. They're working on their coordination and their consistency of their lifts, and
Right.
you know. But yeah, with the mill guys I work with, I mean, I was coaching one guy one day, and I said he has a hard time of not pushing his limits, not with Olympic weightlifting, but he just comes in and smashes himself every day. And
Yeah.
one day I was like, hey man, just stop redlining every day. So then that became, well, don't redline every day. And now it became dread. So all these guys, I tell them dread when they come in, because I'm a big fan of, there's many different types of periodization that work, obviously, but I'm a big fan of Vladimir Shurin and block periodization and those guys. And
Absolutely.
whereas Shurin and I think Zatsiorski was talking about the point system of a 1 through 5, and just introducing that basic concept to these guys here and saying like, hey, your budget is 15 points in a week. You can't have repeating 5 point days. And then show them the basic principles of training, and then let them kind of manipulate within that framework. Has tended to work fairly well so far, but most of them don't, when they first come in, they don't know how to lift. They're still learning how to properly perform the basic movement patterns. And then we start loading it last. They're probably so sick of the volume at this point, but it's that important to get the motor pattern right. Because if the motor pattern's not right, then it's really hard to go back and change it. So,
Well,
um,
it's the most important thing, I think,
mm-hmm.
in any time you're, whatever discipline you're in using a barbell. Barbell's a powerful tool. And it's a and is it causes tremendous amounts of stress. And that stress can be good or bad depending upon how you use it. But I think that the better the movement patterns are, there's what you do, what you create is you create the output is going to be the output that you're planning on. If a squat is a squat, and it's done the way a squat should be done, then you're accumulating the stress that a squat provides. You're developing the fitness qualities that a squat is supposed to uh, to uh, to provide. when you're dealing with a complicated movement, like a more complicated, it's not complicated, like a clean,
Hmm.
there are specific qualities that clean is going to develop. And
Yeah.
when you develop a training program, basically you're saying, what are the fitness qualities I need to improve the whatever desired output is, right? If it's weightlifting, then it's the snatch and the clean and jerk, and if it's strength and conditioning, then depending upon what what the goal is to improve. So essentially, you're using these exercises to create the stressors that you need to create the right output. So if the
Hmm.
movement is done correctly, then you can predict what the outcome is going to be, because the movement is creating the right stressors at the right and creating the right developing the right fitness qualities. If the movement patterns are bad, then it's just this hodgepodge of um, of stress that has no direction.
Exactly. Yeah.
How do you predict outcome if the each exercise is really not doing? We put exercise on the paper. We need to get stronger. We're going to squat. We need to create more explosiveness or reactivity. We're going to do, a clean, or we need to get more posterior chain. So we're going to do a good morning. But if those aren't done the way they're supposed to be done, then how do you know that you're not overdoing something,
Hmm.
underdoing something? The other thing, especially with weightlifting, because the weights are a lot higher than you would do in strength and conditioning, is every time something's done incorrectly, even if it's slight, even
Yep.
just slight deviations, just little uh, micro fluctuations in stability, you're creating these micro traumas.
Hmm.
And it's the accumulation of these micro traumas that causes overuse injuries,
Yeah.
accelerate them. So I stress, even with not as much with my strength and conditioning, because the weight isn't as much, but certainly with my weightlifters, we spend a ton of time on trying to achieve perfect movement and perfect stillness in the receiving positions, especially
Hmm.
overhead, right? So the precision of the movement, like, I don't want to see anything move. When it gets there, it stays there. And I have,
Right.
we pause in those, so we because I don't want accumulated stress that's unnecessary. And movement that isn't precise causes more stress on the system than is necessary. So every time you see these lifters making these heroic, saves every rep in training, that's great, right? Yeah, you're brave and heroic, whatever you want, but you're using a lot more energy and wear and tear than it needs to be. Do it right.
Yeah.
It's not just about making the lift. It's about the quality of the movement. So to me, if you're teaching barbell movement, the priority has to be doing it right before
Hmm.
you're doing it heavy. Uh,
Yeah.
and you'll get more out of it by that approach. The problem is in strength and conditioning, and certainly in weightlifting as well, there are many coaches that don't have that ability, but they do have the ability to put more weight on the bar.
Yeah.
So here we are.
Yeah.
And I think you're not doing your athletes a service by putting weight on the bar that they can't manage correctly.
Yeah. I've got a couple things there. I think that's very well said. I'm going to remember that as far as like unnecessary movement being extra stress. I hadn't thought of it in that light, but you're spot on. Is like that's more time under tension. Now you have to correct that pattern, the imbalance, like whatever you've created by all this unnecessary movement due to egos getting out of control.
I want the time under tension,
Right.
but I don't want it to be saving, trying to regain balance. Right. I want the time under tension to be, I'm in the right position. I'm going to hold it there. So, because I have all my athletes hold
Yep.
1,000, 1,000, then down. Whatever they're doing, the overhead stuff, press, snatch, jerk, doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Even with presses, they're not moving through the range. They're getting it there. They're holding it. Make sure the position is correct. Moving through these ranges, it covers up balance issues, right? So if you're forced to maintain rigidity in the overhead positions, like you're not touching and going, if you're out of balance, you're going to feel it.
Mm-hmm.
So they self-correct, but also that time under tension with in the correct positions is good for the strength, is good for that it creates an isometric contraction in the joint, especially a joint like the shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
It's all soft tissue. So when it's done right, everything is tense. The muscles are all, it's like a suspension bridge, right? So all the cables have to be in perfect balance in order for that thing to stay up and not move. I want to create that atmosphere, especially in the shoulder, with all my athletes. Because if you're in the right position, then chances are you're creating the right ratio of tension within those muscle groups. So, it's really, it seems like a trivial thing, but it's not. It's not.
Especially as you get into the Olympic lifting side of things, where that is the sport. Because
Yeah.
I remember I went up to University of Michigan for 3-4 days throughout the week, and this was back when I was at IU, and met with Bo Sandoval and Mike Favor, and was talking to those guys. And I remember Bo talking about. Like, you don't want to have so much load on the bar that people are just sneaking under. They're trying to sneak under a snatch or sneak under a clean. It needs to be an appropriate load where the speed is the emphasis, where without question you have some left in the tank.
Right.
Now, there certainly is a place for that, where we're going for a placing or a title or a championship or whatever, where it's like freaking send it. But I think in
Hey, Travis,
training,
can I interrupt you for a second?
yeah,
I
absolutely.
have to, you don't have to, I just have to call. One of my athletes is on a short track cycle team. So
Yeah.
I need to. Hey, I'm doing a podcast right now, so we got to make this quick.
Oh shit.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
Day 2. Yeah, back squat. How's your back feeling? Yeah, I saw. All right, let's do doubles in the clean, but from blocks. Uh, uh, do you want to add a jerk to that or push press first? Okay, so let's do 2 plus 1. Yeah. If you want to touch 80%, that's fine, but I don't know if it's necessary. See how you feel.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So that 3-2-1 is just 2 rounds, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you want RDL, or is that too much? You want the hypers?
Um, the RDO kind of stressed me out for a
Uh,
few days. The hypers never really
all right. So let's go. Do them banded, and then all the other stuff that the supplemental stuff. All right. I'll talk to you. See you. Sorry about that.
No, that's I would love to actually keep that in because
Yeah, that's fine.
because for people to hear that, as far as like I don't think a lot of people know and understand what coaching actually is. I think a lot of people are under the assumption like, nope, it's just 3 sets of 10, go do it, don't bother me. And it's very interpersonal of like you ask questions right there. And oh, hey, Coach Waxman, why didn't you have them like maxing out for tons of reps? Doubles? I mean, come on now, like we need to do at least sets of 5 and 10 on, especially on the Olympic lifts. Um, but no, I think that's very valuable for people to hear stuff like that so they can understand like this is what real coaching is. You're asking feedback. How are they feeling? Like, yeah, if we want to touch that 80%, that's great, but we don't have to, you know? Um,
Well, especially if you're training. The weight room work for other sports
yeah,
is a means to get them better, to prove the output of their sport.
yep,
It's not the sport. We're not. They're not. She was a weightlifter, and she is a weightlifter, but a good one too. Uh, so her. It's interesting because she's always been an athlete that lifts right at her potential. Like she's
yeah,
got no reserve. I mean, she's just fearless.
yeah,
So it's great, but uh, so somebody else's they have the sprint team, the cycle team's got their strength coach, and all the other athletes on that team are novices in the weight room.
hmm,
So 80%, like we talked about before, 80% for them is not that much relative
right,
to their ability, their output ability, their ability to jump or run or whatever. But for her, 80% is 80%. She's got to be on the bike today, doing all this crazy stuff.
yeah,
So her 80% for her is going to be a lot more impactful
yeah,
than the. And I just went to California. I worked with those guys for a day, kind of cleaning up their technique and things like that. So, they're great athletes. I mean, you have a pro basketball player, former pro basketball player, two guys that were high level track guys. So these aren't amateurs. These are professional, high level athletes
right,
in their not in the weight room.
right. And
So
right,
with her, you got to be. It's I take the program that's written and I adjust it for her
yeah,
because she needs different things.
and that
So
is I was just having that discussion with a colleague of mine a few weeks ago, and he hasn't, he hasn't spent the time in the weight room that I have, and I've been. This is my 17th year of being a coach, and it's over time, and I mean, there's great people they're a beast on the court, on the field, whatever, but in the weight room they suck, and that's not a bad thing. That's just like you know, exactly to your point. It's a means to an end. They're there because they have to be because their coaches make them. You want to make it as enjoyable as possible, but at the same time, it's like they could care less, and their energy they only have so much. It has to be allocated to the sport to improve upon the sport. And this guy was kind of arguing with me about like, well, no, the better athletes are going to be better in the weight room, and I was like, they might pick up on things quicker, but they're not always the best in the weight room. But just because you're a good weight room kid doesn't mean that you're good on the field either. So
right, you know, I think that, and this is an unpopular because of how the strength and conditioning has I wouldn't know about saying evolved, and could probably has devolved, but how it's the growth of strength and conditioning and the ability to make it a profession.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what's happened is, you know, you have the developmental pie, right? So the different, you can slice it up in different ways. You know, what's the biggest slices are what goes on with the barbell, because that's going to be the most impactful stressor, is what you can do with a barbell.
Mm-hmm.
But now we have, you know, we have mobility specialists, we have functional this, we got all these other slices, these tiny, tiny slices that people can make a living on.
Yeah.
And in their world, for them, it's the biggest slice. And they
Yeah.
sell it and present it as the biggest. This is the most important thing that you have to do. And all those other things are easy.
Mm-hmm.
The hard part is getting good with the barbell.
Yeah.
There are not, you know, we don't have a lot of more. It seems like there aren't. There's a ton of people in the industry selling their whatever they're selling. But at the end of the day, the barbell is the thing that's going to produce the best, most efficient result. Now, that being said, in my experience, nearly every team sport athlete, certainly at the high school level, at the college level, and in most athletes at the pro level, are beginners in the weight room. And it's
100%
not a
correct.
bad. It's not a.
Yeah.
It's not an insult. It is
No.
what it is. So if that's the case, then why are we choosing advanced training methodology for beginners?
Yeah.
So,
You are spot
you know,
on.
it
Like,
just doesn't make any
yeah.
sense to me. So I don't give a shit if you're at Alabama or on the New York Giants or at
Mm-hmm.
Bingham High School. You're a beginner. The training should reflect that.
That's right.
And beginner training is about force production. Force production is about barbell training. Now, your pro athletes, it's a different situation, because if you're there, you're elite.
Right.
You might not need the same things as a high school athlete, but you still are a beginner.
Yep. Yep.
So, man, I don't care so much about the pro world. It's just, that's a whole other mess.
Yeah.
You know, my focus is, I like, you know, the high school specifically, but college. But I'm telling you, I was at University of Utah. You know, I'm at the high school. They're all beginners. I don't give a shit. Even the guys that got drafted, you know, I was be able to see those guys. They're elite on the football field.
Yep.
They're elite when you measure their jump. They're elite when you time them, you know, running. They're elite when you watch them move. But they are not elite with a barbell.
Yep.
And, you know, they did Doug Elsai, the head guy at University of Utah, does a great job. Greg Argus, the assistant, they do a great job over there understanding that. Like, their training's basic. It's great. I loved it. I love to see that. And that's the approach. Like, I look at guys like, I'm not taking anything away from them, like Cal Dietz and some of these other guys that, I mean, you don't need to be getting into the weeds like that with that population. You just don't.
Yeah.
You know, it's great for selling books, but, you know, at the end of the day, you know, you're treating beginners like experts, and they're not.
Yeah. That's
And
you're nailing it because I remember I was talking with Dr. Galpin a few years back, and he was talking about some of the UFC fighters he works with, and
yeah,
he's like, these guys are animals, world class in everything you can think of, but then some of them don't know how to do chin ups properly, push ups properly. They don't know how to goblet squat. And he's like, if you pull those levers and you start using those, like that's the low hanging fruit. And then their performance, which is already high, goes even higher just by
I'm saying.
learning the basics and how to do the basics well. And I just get,
Yeah, I mean, like I got kids. Sorry.
no, you're good. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Especially with these high school kids, if you can't do 50 push-ups, I don't give a shit what you bench press.
Right.
If you can't do 10 pull-ups, what are we doing here? Like, how
Mm-hmm.
advanced you have to be? Do 50
Yeah.
push-ups and 10 pull-ups, then we'll talk about something more.
Right.
Like, I just, like, I don't, look, I get, like, I'm not a big fan of speed coaches, that's, which is, all they do. You got to improve your speed. You got to improve your speed. Really? So, how many team sports are reaching top speed? Do we really care about your front end or back end mechanics? And who gives a shit? You know,
Yep.
how do you go from how do you get from starting to 10 yards?
Mm-hmm.
Let's get good at that, because that's what, if you could dominate the 10-yard radius around where you start from on the field,
Yep.
then you're going to win most of those games. If your
Yep.
team as a whole dominates that element, that's acceleration. What's acceleration? Well, it's the ability to produce force against the ground. Well, how do we improve that? Get your fucking squad up,
Yep. Yep.
right? It's not. It really isn't rocket science, but we try to complicate it because how do we get the Monty Python many years ago? I think it was The Life of Brian or one of those movies. There was a scene about the machine that goes beep. Right? Everybody, oh my God, it's the machine that goes beep. This is the best thing ever. Right? But it's a distraction, right?
Yeah.
But the basics aren't sexy, and it's hard to sell.
Yeah.
What's easy to sell is the 6 week speed school, or here's the sports specific program for quarterbacks.
Oh God, sports specific. You gotta love that. You know.
Don't even get me
It's
started. So yeah,
yeah, it's the
but
yeah, it's the thing with I think I saw a quote that said complexity is the enemy of execution.
oh
And
man, that's a good.
people just try to go in all the time and it's like what like and I tell like I don't know if you can hear it right now, but and I hope it doesn't come through on the recording, but there's guys warming up right now that are they're doing their team pull-ups and push-ups every single day they come in the gym. That's a requirement when they enter and exit. Um,
That's great.
but and they do. Oh shoot, where was I going with that? But it's just hammering these basics home, and people think there's something else. And I explained to these guys like it's barbell work, and we're just manipulating the force equation every day. Are we hitting big mass? Or are we hitting big acceleration? Or are we doing a little bit of both and doing some hypertrophy? Basically that.
Yeah, man, I love that approach. I tell coaches, find. I've been talking about this on my Instagram. Just kind of laying out just some basic overview of my approach to working with my boys, my football boys. But you gotta there are fitness qualities that we need to improve, right? So find I call them, the buckets, right? The bucket. Find exercises, the most effective exercises that you know how to do and coach in each of those buckets, and do those. Like, just do them. Be great at these few things. We're Olympic lifting guys. Like, we like the Olympic lifts, and I think that in most situations, you should be able. Well, you should certainly be able to teach them and use them. You should be able to teach them and do them. Whether you use them is specific to your situation. Like, I didn't use them when I was at the high school first. It just the setup wasn't conducive to it, so I didn't use it. I used other things. But
Right.
now with the weight room that I have, I can use them. But the point is, there's an explosive bucket, right? There's a strength. There's a lower body, a general strength bucket. There's an upper body pull, upper body push. There's a posterior, there's a hinge bucket. Find the few exercises that are the most impactful, and there
Right.
is a hierarchy.
Yep.
Don't tell me a single leg squat is as impactful as a
Yep.
back squat. Doesn't mean a single leg squat isn't good, and I use it with my guys, but it's not.
Yep.
No matter what kind of bullshit spin you put on it, it's not the same, and it's not better. It's worse as far as the ability to create a disruption in your homeostasis. Just because you can't use as much load.
Yeah.
One guy talks about, well, if you could do 50%, you did double it, and that's your back squat. Bullshit.
Right.
That's not the case. If you can do a 200-pound single leg squat, doesn't mean you can fucking squat 400 pounds.
Right.
It doesn't work that way. And that 200-pound single leg, not having 400 pounds on your back and only having 200 pounds, it's not the same impact. So it's not efficient.
Well, what about the EMG
Now, if
stuff?
that's all you got,
Yeah.
well, look.
No,
The glute activate. When I hear the conversation start with, well, the glute, I'm like, I don't want to hear it.
No, I know what you're
Don't
saying.
want to hear it.
Yeah. Because
So
you're right. The bone
whatever is in your toolbox. Yeah.
the bone
So, but
adaptation.
get great at. Yeah, whatever, man. I'm telling you, it drives me insane. I always hope that. I'm glad you're doing that, and I hope my guys play against your guys.
Yeah, right. Right.
'Cause, yeah, we're gonna roll you up into a little ball and throw you in the garbage.
Yeah. That's right. It's like
At the end of the day,
you are spot
go
on
ahead,
with what
sorry.
you're saying. Sorry, I think there is a delay for some reason, and I think it's coming from my end. So, but yeah, the loading is entirely different with a bilateral movement versus unilateral stuff. Like, unilateral has some place, but I put it more of like a light recovery day. I don't count it necessarily as like
Supplemental exercise. They're great.
not a main stressor.
I do. The one leg squat is a big part of what I do with my high school boys. Find great value in it, but it's not a replacement.
Yep.
For a bilateral movement. It's just not. When I hear some of these popular coaches that talk about the single leg squat. They don't back squat anymore. They use single leg squat because when I was in my experience, this to them talking. Well, you just a ton of guys getting hurt. Well, I've been doing this for 31 years. I can remember one guy getting hurt, not overused stuff, but getting hurt from a back squat. And it wasn't because he was back squatting; it was because of other things. One guy. So if you have a a large amount of people who you're hurting in your weight room because of an exercise,
Yep.
You're looking at the wrong problem. You're the problem, not the
Yep.
exercise.
Yep.
And they talk about, well, the back is the limiter in the back squat. Well, okay. Well, then then let everything rise at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Movement is not about isolation. We don't move in isolation. The movement is a coordinated concert of muscle contraction and relaxation. In a particular sequence. It's everything working together. So you're training the bulk of the major exercises you use should have a combination of the ability to have to coordinate, not isolate, coordinate
Mm-hmm.
with both, heavier loads to a certain extent and more speed. So the more load on the system, the more profound and the more quickly you're going to get an adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
You can bullshit around with all this other lower intensity stuff. That's forced low intensity, right? Because you can't have high output. When you have a single leg, by design, it's going to be less than a bilateral movement.
Mm-hmm.
So your output is lower. Therefore, the adaptation doesn't come as quickly, or not at the level that it would come with the higher load.
Right.
It's not like we got all day with these guys.
Yep.
Right. So how do you maximize the time that you have? And you maximize the time that you have by creating the adaptation in the quickest way. The quickest way is through load.
Yep.
I'm not saying I don't want people grinding shit out. And I'm saying, with the appropriate load. And just by math, bilateral is going to be more than unilateral. It's just the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
So, if the unilateral comes at the end, it's a remedial exercise.
Let's see. Can you still hear me okay? It was buffering out there for a minute. Okay. Yeah, because we'll do a unilateral circuit at the end of a training week to do essentially a recovery day, and we know that it's by design, and it is not anywhere close to our heavy days that we're actually chasing strength. And
it's a different stimulus.
Yeah, it totally, and it's setting them up to recover, to heal, and like if they want to, it's not. It has its place in training, but we know it's going to be a way back down day, And yesterday, I was working with the local fire department academy. They've got a fire academy. Let's see, we've got 10, 12 guys, and anyway, we're limited by our equipment and we're limited by our time.
Right.
So I only have 30 minutes with these guys, and we do a really quick carry circuit to warm up, and then the two main exercises yesterday were we have very heavy carries that we do, and then some very heavy sled drags and or sled pushes. And the best part was had one guy who goes, well, what muscles am I going to be working with this workout? I was like, well, for this training session, you're going to be working, you'll feel like, how about you tell me after the fact? This is this is not a random throw shit at the wall. This is heavy loading on the system by design that makes a hell of a lot of sense for firefighters, because figure out how to pick it up, figure out how to get it overhead, carry it, and then after the fact, every muscle on this guy is he's sore. He's going to be like, oh, okay, now I get it. My obliques are working. My glute medius is working. And that's the thing is I think people tend to overthink rather than just do. And then when the loading becomes substantial enough, oh, okay, that's the muscles that were really getting developed.
You got to start getting into the deeper fibers, right? And
Oh yeah.
and you can do it. It happens with fatigue, plus load,
Mm.
right? So with athletes that aren't weightlifters or powerlifters, you can't do it with high intensity all the time. Like you can't just lift heavy. Um, you have to lift at a moderate intensity with enough volume to create enough fatigue where you can start digging down into the deeper fibers, and but not so much that they can't do the amount of volume they need to do. An experienced athlete, weightlifter, or powerlifter, they could do, a 3 reps that can really do have a huge impact on your system because of the amount of weight relative to their ability,
Mm-hmm.
maximum ability. You're never going to get there with non-weightlifters and powerlifters. So you have to create that level of stress through volume. Speed is another one, is another way to get there. But the intensity I don't, is going to be moderate.
Yeah.
So, but it has to be enough to create the stress, but not so much that you screw them up for the next day. It's this delicate balance, but you can't beat people up with intensity outside of barbell sports.
So
It's so you have to so you have to be you have to use so if that's so you have to find other ways.
I have a question because I know you know the weightlifting world as far as the history of the USSR and versus the Bulgarian system much deeper and better than I do. So I want to get some clarification on this. I had heard, and you know how stuff gets passed down through the internet, and you read it in an article, and you don't know
Yeah.
what's true and what's not. Um, I had heard that the USSR system, they're looking at folks as like, hey, we're looking at multiple Olympics. That's how deep we're going in this thing. Whereas the Bulgarian system, hey, if we get you to one Olympics, we're happy, and then we could care less. Is that consistent with what you had seen as far as like looking into the systems? Well, because when we're talking volumes and intensities, like the Russian system might be more of, hey, we're going to do a lot of moderate, high volume stuff, and the Bulgarian system is going to be max every day or whatever, you know?
Uh, I don't think the intent of the Bulgarian system was just, going to get you to one Olympics and that's it. I just think that, so to back up, if you look at developmental concepts of the Bulgarian system and the Russian system, like when they start, it's the same. Like they're not taking 14-year-old kids and doing, max weight. Uh, they're developing them the same way. Once they reach to the national level, national team, then that's where there was this change in philosophy. Um, I think by the very nature of the of Abajeev's system, it if you were able to survive more than one quad, that you had less athletes that were able to survive past their first quad because of the intensity um of the system. I don't think that was the intent, but I think just it's just the nature of the beast.
Okay.
So you can't argue with the success
Right.
of that Bulgarian system. I mean, think about, I think the Russians had 500,000 weightlifters, to pick 50 or so for their national team, where the Bulgarians had 50,000, and they were
Okay.
beating the Russian. So, the country's smaller. So you can't argue with the success of it. It's kind of like, Takano changed his training system once he spent time with Abajev in Bulgaria.
Oh,
And then
okay.
when
I
he
didn't.
came back, this was right before I got there. And that changed a little bit of how he approached training. And he developed this kind of little bit of a hybrid system. But the concept of stress to create change,
Mm.
the intense stress was a lot of his conversations and time he spent with Abajev. So it's a very effective way to do it. It's just not a very humane way.
Yeah.
But I don't think it was ever. It just, that's the way it kind of worked out, just because of the nature of the systems. So, but yeah, it was. People think, oh, it's so much fun to just max out all the time. Try for a little while. See how
Well,
that. By the time those guys got to the national team in Bulgaria, they're just mutants.
yeah.
Just mutants.
Because you
And
watch him, you watch him come out like there's no expression. They just boom, snatch, done, move on. And
I knew Antonio Krastev through John Bros was Antonio Krastev's good friend, and I got a chance to meet Krastev a few times and talk with him. He moved to New York. He was a bouncer in New York, which was crazy. And I got to talk to him, and he really didn't like weightlifting all that much. Uh, so I would ask him. I was like, Antonio, like, why did you do weightlifting? He says, I had two options. I could be a weightlifter or a coal miner. So I chose weightlifting. It's just, so when you talk about no expression, this is their job. Like, this is their best option. In
yeah,
China, I got a chance to, every time I coach internationally, you would talk to the coaches, and in China, one of their strategies is, they try to find somebody from the mountains of somewhere where there's no, like, they're shitting and pissing in the street, because there's no it's just terrible
yeah,
existence, and weightlifting becomes their best option. So this is everything for them. They excel in weightlifting, and all of a sudden their family gets elevated.
yeah,
Right? There's food. Everybody gets fed. They live in a better apartment. They have these things. And it's huge motivation.
yeah.
I talked to one of the Chinese coaches. I think it was at the World Universities in Mexico, Merida, Mexico, and I asked him. I was like, "What are the most important things when you're trying to uh, identify talent?" And he said, "It's two things." He said, "The most important things are motivation and coordination." And he said, "That's it." He says, "Everything else you can teach." He said, "But they don't have motivation and coordination, they're not going to be good." So the
Yeah.
motivation. In the United States, we don't have motivation. We don't have. It takes a special kind of cat to be motivated enough to do this in weightlifting. It's a hard life. It's the same hard life that they're living in China. The same, we're doing the same, we're experiencing the same kind of abuse,
Hmm.
but we have a lot of options. Like, when it gets really hard, it's why we lose people, because at a certain point, weightlifting becomes really hard. Doesn't start out that way, but it gets that way. And when that happens, when your friends are going to Cancun, or you wake up and you feel like a bus hits you, and it's sunny out and you want to go to the beach. It takes a special person to say, I'm not doing any of that. I'm going to go train.
Yeah.
For what? You got other options. So not everybody's got that thing in them that keeps them coming and keeps them pushing past where they want to be. Where in China, if you don't, then go ahead, go back and live in your town where you shit on the street. So weightlifting becomes your best option. So that's where I think talk about the big difference between us and even though like now we're doing really well, and I think it's a testament to the coaches individually seeking out excellence. We're not, we don't have a system that develops coaches like that. It's just not our system. It's not a knock on what we do. It's just not who we are. So it really, it's that entrepreneurial spirit. Coaches say, I want to be the best weightlifting coach, so now I have to figure out how to do it. In China or Russia or some of these other countries, they go to school, they become, basically PhDs in weightlifting. It's a government job that they work for the government, so they get a paycheck and this is their job. You could be here you're a cop, you're a fireman, you're a municipal worker. They're working for the government. They're weightlifting coaches that work for the government. The athletes are, it's in some countries they're military, they're soldiers, but their job is sport. So they're it's a very different motivation. In Iran, in China, if you're the best weightlifter in the world, that's a meaningful thing. You have kids with posters of you on the wall. Liu Xiaojun is Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
So, it's a very different, I always think that when we see athletes from the United States rise to the top, it's really remarkable because all the odds are against us. There's no reason that it should happen other than pure will, and it takes a special athlete to rise to that level. They're different. And I think it's harder coming from the United States, Hampton and Jordan, some of our top medalists, Meredith medaled at the Worlds, and it's, you look at some of these athletes and you're like, man, how do you kudos to you, because you have no reason to do this. You could be doing 50 other things, but this is what you choose to dedicate yourself to. Other countries, it's, they got no choice. So I think I talk about the American system. There is no system.
Yeah.
It's a bunch of individual coaches figuring it out and finding special athletes that will commit. Something romantic about that. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there is. There's I remember hearing Dan John say one time that for elite athletes it comes down to genetics and geography. And hearing you add in the piece about motivation, I think is a third key element that would go into
geography. Geography dictates motivation.
Yeah.
Right. So if your geography is in Central Asia, right, then there are certain things that are going to be involved with living in Central Asia.
Right.
So it's So it's just a different way of saying the same thing.
Yeah. And it makes you wonder when you see these athletes like, Michael Phelps, for example. What if he had been born in, like, I don't know, Nome, Alaska, and had never had the opportunity, like he had those anthropometrics, never had the opportunity to even meet a coach who's like, hey, you'd make a great swimmer or whatever.
Right?
Um,
Because they're not being identified in sports school. Hey, you're going to be a swimmer,
right.
right? It's luck.
Yep.
It really is luck half the time. You know, it does. You know, if Carl Lewis never runs, like if he does something else, then we don't. You know, we don't ever get that. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it is there is a luck component because we're not identifying talent. You know, we don't have that system. In other countries, there are these sports schools, and it's like a physical education, and then they can identify. Okay, you're going to be. This is what China did
Mm-hmm.
uh, before was it 2004? So they wanted to have an Olympics. The Beijing Olympics was that
Oh, eight.
2004, 2000, whatever it was,
Yeah.
2008. So they decided 4 or 8 years prior that they wanted to have an Olympics, and they were not very good in most Olympic sports. So what they did is they said, okay, we want to host an Olympics, and we want to it's sports uh, in repressive systems is a tool for national pride, right? It's a very different thing. Like to be the best at these sports is a very it hits different in that culture. So they just basically they don't invent anything. They just take from other, which is fine. They looked at what the Russians were doing and the Eastern Europeans, and they said, okay, how do we take that and adapt it to what we're doing? And they said we want to identify the sports that we can excel in.
Mm-hmm.
And weightlifting became, especially the women, because their men didn't became better after their women. So people don't remember 2008. I think they might have won 10 of, I don't know if they won all the world championship medals, but most of them for the women. They identified weightlifting as a sport that they can be good at, and they dumped a ton of money and resources into weightlifting, and they developed this great weightlifting program. But if you look at the history of weightlifting, you don't see China anywhere. They had one or two guys here and there, but 2008 was their coming out party. Their women just dominated, and then the men followed. But you don't. That's not going to happen in a non-communist country or a
Yeah.
non-authoritarian country.
And
It's because you don't have that level of control.
yeah, I think you're absolutely obvious. Yeah, that's with the level of control is huge. And then I also think about when you mentioned culture, it seems like the United States culture tends to be more microwave mentality. I want it now. Give me this. Give me this. I expect results right away. Whereas other cultures, they tend to be more patient and they understand the delayed gratification aspect a little bit better. Um, but
I don't know if they understand it more. I just think that it is what it is,
right,
right? Like development takes time,
yeah,
and couple that with the athletes don't have an option. This is what
yeah,
it is.
right,
So, they understand the developmental process, and that takes time. So, we as a, I mean, we don't. Many coaches don't understand the developmental, and it's hard. Like, how do you? Somebody comes to your gym and says, "Hey, I want to be the next great whatever." Okay, great. Well, it's going to take 6 years. What do you mean it's going to take 6 years? I mean, I got to post on Instagram now.
Right.
So, you know, how do you, it's a hard sell.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's almost a miracle to get somebody to, like, especially in weightlifting, to get somebody to the Olympics.
Yeah.
Because everything is going against you. You got, parents saying, why are you wasting your time? Get a job, right? You got boyfriend, girlfriend saying, you don't spend enough time with me. You got the allure of all these other things. You don't have the support. You have to develop, this pod of doctors and therapists, and it's just, and how do you make a living? Some of our athletes are making a decent living. Not if you live in LA or New York or something like that. I mean, you can't. No matter how much you make, it's not going to be enough. But it's just it's practically impossible. But we do it. We do it. One thing great about the United States is we've always had that entrepreneurial spirit.
Right.
And that goes with coaching and as well. How do you manage all that and keep somebody interested and dedicated for the time it takes for them to be great? All of us coaches have, top coaches have had more talented athletes leave than stay. And, most of the time it's not from anything that we did or didn't do. It's just, other things get in the way.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen in other places. The people that we're now beating.
And
so you can take, Columbia and all they can take their system and they can shove it up their ass because we're beating them anyway.
because when I'm seeing the recent posts from Olivia Reeves and Kate and and seeing these women are crushing it, and it's really cool and popular, and it's getting more attention now. So I'm optimistic that more people are going to want to do this, and they're starting to see this was not overnight stuff that happened suddenly. That's what you're seeing. You're seeing all the impressive result right now, but you haven't seen the years of dedication and saying no to things, and so I'm hoping that this continues to trend in the right direction. So
yeah, I mean, it's Olivia Reeves is just her coach is great guy, and but she's an anomaly.
mm-hmm.
She's just a kid that her coach did a great job, does a great job with her, but she's got something inside of her that just keeps her coming back and doing these great things.
Yeah.
She's a young girl. I get it. The world is her oyster, but she chooses to be in the weight room.
Yeah.
And doing these hard things. I mean, it's remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
To have that kind of athlete. You can't create that. You
Right.
can cultivate it, but as a coach, you can't create that level of commitment. That's got to be something inside of you. When I came, I'm definitely not comparing myself to Olivia Reeves by any stretch of the imagination, but I came when I came to weightlifting. I did my whole life to the sport. In lieu of everything else, everything else took a back seat, and it was hard. I sacrificed a lot financially, socially, just emotionally, to chase this thing. And I don't see that very often. I think, especially with weightlifting becoming more popular thanks to CrossFit, weightlifting has become cool, which it never was. So, people, weightlifting has become a hobbyist activity. People like to dabble,
Mm-hmm.
and their qualifying totals are so low that you can dabble a little bit and qualify for these competitions in it. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I'm just saying that because you're on this stage with the lights and people watching, it gives you some kind of level of accomplishment.
Mm-hmm.
But weightlifting, it's not high level weightlifting. It's hobbyist weightlifting. When you look at these AO series meets, you got a lot of bad weightlifting. From comparing it to what we're seeing at like world championships or things like that. I'm not saying, I appreciate that people want to do it, but
Right.
it's not being done at a high level.
Right.
I'm glad that people want to do it. But it's, they got jobs, they got families, they got other things, and they do weightlifting.
Yeah.
Olivia Reeves, Wes Kitts, they're weightlifters. That's their life. Everything in their life revolves around that. And they're talented. And they have good coaches. And then we see the result.
And
so, it's different.
I've, because throughout as I was learning and continue to learn about not just weightlifting, but strength and conditioning, I look at, regardless of the people, I look for the commonalities, so like, I remember I first heard it from Louis Simmons, Glenn Penley, I think Travis Mash, and basically you're describing the same thing as like, essentially like the great coaches and the great lifters understand, they call it the way of the samurai was the first phrase I heard from Louis Simmons, where he's like, hey, there is a obsession, a true dedication to this singular thing, and you are dedicating your whole life to it, and that is so rare to run across in nature. Like how it is luck. It's like being exposed to it, and then that now this is what I'm gonna do.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I think, the one of the things that's missing in coaching now, and we had more of it decades ago, was the pursuit of mastery.
Yeah.
So I have some friends, one of my good friends, Adam Lang, he's a world-class chef, and we trained together. His shop was right next to my gym, and we would have these conversations, two totally different worlds, right? But the commonality was we were obsessed, and our whole lives revolved around, being a master in the things that we did. And there's a cost to that
Right.
that a lot of people aren't willing to pay.
Yeah.
Huge cost. And I have some people in my life that are of that mind in different worlds. And we all share that one thing is we were going to do whatever, our whole pursuit in life is to get as close to being a master in what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And it just takes time, and it's a hard ask in this world, because if you want to, like, if someone asks me, like, how do I become a great coach, they don't want to hear the answer.
Yeah.
The answer isn't take a course, get an internship, and now just start. It's a more complicated process, and it takes time.
Yep.
And time has been distorted. The concept of time has been distorted as information has become more easily accessible. We have this connection with, we want to learn, we want to find something out. I'll just type it into Google and find it out.
So
but finding something out, understanding the facts, is not the same thing as being a master. Being a master is having the facts, but understanding how they all weave together. And that comes through time and experience. And it's hard to get somebody to want to take that time and understand how all these things fit together, instead of saying, I can recite these facts. All you got to do is read a book.
Yeah.
But the application of those things into different situations is understanding. I always talk about, compared to music.
Mm-hmm.
You can write the notes down on a paper, but music is not just the notes. It's what happens in between the beats. That's what great music is. Great coaching is not just understanding the facts, but it's understanding, the spaces in between the facts.
Mm.
And it just takes time, experience, observation, and then, evaluation and contemplation and all these things. And you can't do that in a weekend.
That's why the music conductor is always the oldest guy, and understands how all the pieces intertwine and work together.
Yeah. But the problem with that is, it's hard to make money with that approach, right?
Yeah.
So it's really, you can go out there and get a large following and make money, and the metric of success that a lot of people look at is how much money you're making. And I'm all for making money. We all need it. But just because you're making money, it doesn't mean you're good at what you do.
Right.
Especially in coaching, right? There's got to be other metrics that you measure your success by. Because it's easy to make money as a coach. It really is nowadays. If you can't make money as a coach, then something's wrong with you. But that can't be. But the problem is, now I'm making money, I must be good. I don't have to, then I'm doing everything right.
Mm-hmm.
We see this a lot in the pros, right? We get some guy from the neighborhood, you're his best friend, and you're throwing the ball to him, and now he makes the NFL, and now you're the best strength coach in the world because all the guys in your neighborhood are in the NFL, and you the one throwing the ball to them. So now you're the expert.
Yep.
Right? That can't be how we evaluate, but that's how it is, right? How do you know? I got 15 guys in the NFL. Here's my ladder drills that I do, and this is why they're there.
Yep.
Probably not.
Yep.
But if you don't but how else do you evaluate? People don't know how else to evaluate somebody's mastery. It's followers and money. It wasn't like that in the past. So, and it's hard, right? Like, if you're making a shit ton of money doing what you're doing, why would you change?
Yeah,
that's why, that's why early on when I work with young coaches, I talk to them about the importance of being a good CEO of your life,
mm-hmm.
making money, but understand that the money has to be a result of good work.
Mm-hmm.
Good. And what's good work? Well, here's how we define good work. So I think it's, is making sure that young coaches understand what they're doing, why they're doing what they're doing, the importance of it, why it's important to be good at it.
Mm-hmm.
Good at teaching movement, good at solving physical problems. And as a result of that, and being a good business guy. And the result of that is going to be, you're going to have athletes, you're going to have a system that develops athletes consistently the right way, and you're going to make money. It's not I'm just going to make money and I'm successful.
Yeah.
So I think that it's a very preachy soapbox thing, and I understand that. But it's important because we got a lot of we don't need any more bad coaches. We got plenty.
Well,
We don't have enough coaches that are in the pursuit of mastery.
The thing I appreciate with everything you've said so far is, those who are not coaches and have not had the opportunity or been trained by really good coaches don't understand how much truth there is in everything you've said. Like, this is all entirely 100% accurate, and people don't like to hear the truth. They don't like to hear but this is the way it is. 100% is. There's guys that I've seen at the collegiate sector up to the highest Power 5 you can think of who are just cheerleaders, and they don't know fuck all about training. And people automatically assume, oh, well, you're working with the Power 5 top tier or a pro level, you must know what you're doing. It's like, nah, it's probably easier to train those guys because they're so like how much are you actually doing? And then I think it's even harder to develop the junior high school kids because they're still growing, they're still learning, and then you have to put them in a group and work them together. If you can get those guys to move well, then no doubt you can get anybody else to move well. But if you have people who have, like I watched your video the other day of my favorite argument is when I hear people talk about like the Olympic lifts are hard to teach. They take too much time. And then I think you put out a video that's like, well, watch me teach it in 8 minutes or 11 minutes or something. And,
8 minutes.
It's like, this is, so that whole, well, let's not do something that's hard. Let's not do something that's like, take some time. You know what I mean? Like, that's basically what people are trying to say and do is like, hey, well, let's just do this instead, even though we have all this great equipment. It's like,
my whole thing is like I said before, maybe the Olympic lifts aren't the right fit for your situation. I get that. That's a great reason to not use them. But don't tell me that they're too hard, take too long to teach, or they're not as effective as other things. That is code for I don't know what I'm doing.
yeah.
So I see this with real high level guys who I respect, as coaches. But when they tell me we don't use the Olympic lifts because they're dangerous, because they're too hard to teach, it takes too long, I know that they've never done them at any level, and they don't know how to teach them. That's what that's the code.
Right.
So when you hear that, everybody, when someone says they're too hard, take too long, they're too dangerous, that means they don't know how to do it.
Right.
Because I will say this, and I can say this with confidence. Certainly anybody who has come from weightlifting to strength and conditioning, and people who have come from an Olympic lifting background for sport and are now strength coaches, none of them will say that they're too hard, take too long, or are dangerous.
Right.
They won't.
Right.
And they all will use them if the situation is appropriate. So it drives me nuts when I hear accomplished coaches say that. Their ego doesn't allow them to say, I don't know, I'm not good at it, so I'm not going to use it. I'm fine with that. I think you should learn, but that's a whole other thing. But let's talk truth to the situation. It's too bad. It's too bad. But
because to me, you know,
It is
especially,
what it is. Ego is a terrible thing.
yeah, because people are, and I don't know where that disconnect happens or whatever, but I was fortunate to be around, Coach Robe and some other great dudes early on who said, hey, if you don't know something, just fucking say you don't know and we'll help you. But somewhere along the way, like
I'm
people,
happy to,
this thing's, can you still
no,
hear
go
me
ahead.
okay?
Sorry. We have this delay.
Yeah, this,
Yeah.
my internet, so I'm on base right now and I'm in my office and it's got this like little Wi-Fi puck and every once in a while it slows down. So, but yeah, we got about probably 5 minutes left, and then I gotta. Um,
Okay.
but um, but yeah, like every good coach I've ran into is more than happy and willing to teach and help each other and others, like not just other coaches, but people just have to set their ego to the side and say, "Hey, I'm having trouble with this. Can you help me with it?" Oh yeah, totally. Let's get this figured out. Um,
Yeah, I mean, it takes a village, right? Like you have to
mhm,
be competent in what you're competent in, and
mhm,
what you're not like, and you have to know enough about the other stuff to be able to ask good questions, and you have to be, your ego has to be in a place where you can bring other people in. It's you can't just have this, like, this is my fiefdom and I'm going to control it, and I'm not going to allow anything else in. And anything that's not in this fiefdom is wrong,
right.
or is bad, or is ineffective. But really, I don't know. I'm not comfortable with it, so it's bad. So what kind of bullshit is that?
Right.
That's crazy talk.
Yeah.
So, the great thing about being good at things is that you can assimilate or filter what you, at any given time, what's appropriate. Like, you're not limited. It's not everything is in a hammer. The more you know, right, you can, it's the old cliche, right? The more you know, the more tools you have, you can use the right tool for the right job. You're not limited, by the two tools you have. And every situation, I'm going to use these two tools.
Right.
And, sometimes that's using the tool yourself, or being competent uh, and confident enough to say, hey, this guy, he's great with this tool. We're going to bring him in. Doesn't mean that it's not a statement on your lack of knowledge.
Mhm.
It's a statement on how confident you are in what you know, which means that you're okay with other people coming in to your house and helping you out. Or because you can't be great at everything. Like, if I have a guy that wants to run the 100 meters, I'm not going to coach him. I mean, I know how to run 100 meters, and I know I can have conversations about what that takes. But if somebody wants to be great at running the 100 meters, then I'm not their guy.
Mhm.
That's why I'm not a sprint coach. But you want to get from here to there 10 yards away, I'm your guy.
Mhm.
So, and I got no problem. And I tell my guys that all the time. If you want to be great at 100 meters, go run track. So I think, the ability to know what you're good at, know what you're not great at, and have the confidence to to bring other people in. I just think it's a problem in leadership, seeing this in USA weightlifting with leadership, I think some of the leadership isn't very confident in their ability to lead,
Yeah.
and they overcompensate, by being aggressive in policy and policy implementation. If you're good at what you do, you don't overreact, right? You don't have to, because you're confident enough to take the criticism and make the change, instead of saying, "Oh my God, I'm being attacked. I have to attack back." So we see this in coaching too. I'm being attacked. I don't know this. I'm going to attack back. I think that's a poor way of dealing with things.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. As far as I'm writing that down right now. If you're confident in what you do, you don't have to be aggressive. That's a great, very well said. All right, this was freaking awesome. I would love to do like second installment, third installment if you have time, because this is.
Let me know when. I'm cool. I love talking shop,
because this is really fun. I've got we got some other guys I think we could bounce some ideas off of and just shoot. And I'm just here just to learn, just to listen and see what I can try adding into with my guys. But yeah, for those, I should have mentioned this at the front side, but I remember reading your articles and watching your YouTube stuff from 12, 14 years ago, whenever you started putting stuff out, and I've learned a tremendous amount from you, and I really appreciate and value your time. And I mean, even those things, those YouTube videos, those instructional videos, I still use a ton of that with my guys. So thank you for just all your contributions. But yeah, where can
thank you very much, Dan.
But yeah, where can people get a hold of you or follow you? Because I want people to check you out, because you've got tons of great info that you're putting out all the time that I think people can benefit from.
So right now, Instagram is my primary source of information. It's _Sean_Waxman on Instagram. I have a website, SeanWaxman.com and Waxman'sGym.com, but right now it's just a holding page. I'm in the process of revamping all that. So I guess messaging me on Instagram is probably the best. I get inundated with emails every day, so a lot of them I miss them. So, I got a book coming out, Suffer Smarter, and it's not a weightlifting book, but it's basically a way to. I talk about why suffering is important for growth, and how to create it in your life in a safe and sustainable way through the lens of the barbell. So it's a book on how to. It's kind of like a self-help book, kind of, not really, but it's using the lessons learned through a life of exertion and training, and how that process of suffering is so important to maintain in your life, and how to do it. So that's coming out hopefully at the end of the month. And then so that's what I got going on. But yeah, you want to get me, just hit me up on Instagram. I have a Facebook account, but I don't ever check it, so don't bother. And I haven't, so not a huge social media fan, but it is what it is.
Well, thank you again. Stick around for a few minutes, so this thing can